Hey guys, welcome to Pickup Game with Seth Greenberg. Got Mark Few, Rick Carlisle, Tom Izzo, and myself. And with everything that's going on in the world today and everything we're dealing with, I'd just like to kind of get your guys' take a little bit on how you're dealing with it personally and how you're dealing with it in terms of trying to stay connected with your teams. Obviously, Tom and Few, you got it a little bit different, obviously dealing with the college situation. But Rick, obviously, kind of wondering, if you're going to have a season, when would it start, and how do you stay connected with your team? So, Mark, how's it going with you?
From a personal side of things, it's been, it's just really slowed everything down. Obviously way more family time, which has been great, and a challenge also just with school being at home and things like that. But it's been good. It's been good, and we're just kind of adjusting daily. And then with the team's been the interesting thing. Has been well documented. It just ended right prior to the NCAA tournament, so that was really tough to deal with. And then just trying to shepherd your guys through, moving on. The guys that are early entries and even my seniors, as far as moving them on and not being able to be around them has been challenging. And then the guys that we have on campus or still on the team has been a real challenge. I got 4 international kids that haven't been able to go home. So they've been stuck in the dorms here the whole time. So that's been tough.
Rick, a little different situation in the NBA. Obviously, there's so much uncertainty in where you guys are in this season. What are you dealing with on a daily basis, individually and professionally?
Well, things like this happen. You got to try to see the opportunity in it. From a professional standpoint, we're keeping in touch with our guys weekly. Myself, my coaching staff, we're doing it through text. We're doing it through calls. We're doing it through some Zoom sessions. I'm doing a couple of Zoom sessions per week with my staff, and we're talking about our team. And I've also this week started to have some guest coaches on Zoom calls. That's the cool thing about Zoom is you can invite someone in and oh hey. Hey, Lupe.
That's the cool thing about Zoom calls.
So a couple days ago, we had the great Doug Collins on one of our calls, just talking basketball. And Doug's a guy with an amazing history in the game, both from a coaching standpoint. You go back to the '72 Olympics; he was part of that whole thing, which was just an incredibly crazy story about the clock being reset 3 times and stuff like that. And this week, tomorrow we're going to have Phil Jackson join us for a Zoom call. My staff's really looking forward to that, especially in the middle of the documentary on ESPN. But like anything, you try to find the opportunity, like what Mark said about more family time. It's been great to reconnect, so consistently on a day-to-day basis with my wife and daughter, but it's probably created some challenges for them. So, we go day to day and, we try to find things to make the situation better, both in our home and in our city.
Are you surviving?
I am. I had the same issues as these two guys. My wife said, hey, this will be our football coach just retired, Mark D'Antonio. So she said this would be good for you to I thought she meant practice retirement. She said, no, practice being a husband. So I'm working the other way, but audition. Yeah, I'm auditioning right now to be a husband. But I think it is great. I got my kids home too. One's out of school and one's a freshman, and they're both home. So I get to spend some time with them. But with the players, I've done at least one Zoom call a week with everybody. That's been kind of fun because you get everybody on the screen, and I just sit back and let them rip each other for their haircuts or their beards or what they're doing. It brings a little camaraderie. I'm a little worried about the mental health of everybody, at least in the college level. And And then I've had a couple of Zoom calls with the parents just to kind of fill them in on what's going on, which nobody really knows. And, my staff, recruiting calls and Zoom calls, and, you can bring in juniors now. We even got more problems than you used to have, Rick. We got more of them in college for Mark and I, but it's been interesting, and I think it's been good.
Hey, come on over to the NBA then if you guys don't like college.
We're probably telling you, come on to college. You don't like the NBA. I guess we all got problems.
I wouldn't touch college. I can tell you that. I'd be like starting over.
Oh, man. No doubt about that. So you guys watched Last Dance, and you guys all have different perspectives on it. Rick, there was obviously a picture of you at the All-Star game as an assistant coach with Larry Bird. But what's your you live the NBA every day. Love the lettuce on the top of the head, by the way. It looks great. But what is your takeaway from you live the NBA every single day, but looking back now through the tunnel, maybe in reverse, what's your big takeaway from yesterday?
Well, overall, not just yesterday, but overall, I really like this series because it puts a huge focus on the obsession of winning titles. And, back in that era of the 80s and the 90s, the best players were gauging, their legacy and what they were going to be remembered for on the number of rings that they had. That was the only thing. And as you watch Michael Jordan, during all this, it's clear. He says it many, many times. People said that I couldn't make players better. They said that Larry and Magic were the only ones that could do it, and I wanted to prove that I could do it. And it's just, I think it's a great message. Now, there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's a lot of, to say that this is compelling is like such an understatement because the footage of everything is just, it's amazing. I remember that scene in the locker room before the 1998 NBA All-Star game. We were in Madison Square Garden. And, there was a lot of things going on. Larry had said to Michael Jordan before it was right around this time before the game. He said something like, "Hey, Mike, Kobe's down there saying that the torch is going to get passed today." It was like Larry and Magic are there, saying this kind of stuff to Michael, and it really got Michael in a froth. And then he of course went out and was the MVP of the All-Star game, and he played, as hard as any player I've ever seen play in an All-Star game. But the series is amazing. And hey, when you go from the episodes and then you get during the week, and there's all kinds of stuff on the internet, on talk radio, people talking about this and that. Last week, David Falk was all over the radio, talking about stuff related to Michael and defending his client and stuff like this. It's just during this time, this has been a real blessing for everybody to see because, we haven't been able to do much else.
Iz, what do you think, man?
Well, I loved it too. I loved it for the basketball part, but I loved it for the human interest stories. As Rick said, there were so many things that we don't get to see behind the scenes, especially if you're a college guy. And I got a chance to work Michael's camp for 7 years. He had that fantasy camp in Vegas. And so I got to know him a little bit. And then through Magic, you heard, and the one thing that I've always heard from Irvin was, nobody worked harder than Michael Jordan. And yet, since he knew better because he was right there with the Lakers, he said Kobe, was the closest things as far as how hard he worked every day and how much winning was important. And I think Rick's right. It's a great message for our younger kids. Even as you said, or Mark and I talked about, he gets cut from his varsity team and he didn't even transfer. What the hell is that? You're supposed to transfer. Michael must not have been very smart. He's got to transfer if you get cut. So I thought that was all those things were good for the modern day kid to listen to. And much more than basketball, I thought was the human interest side of it.
Huey. Hey, I'm coming at it from just a pure fan standpoint. I remember watching all those games and living through that time, and I remember a lot of those series and those moments. But it's just been really just great TV, I think. I mean, we're all looking for stuff to do, and Sunday nights now is just marked by, hey, we got to get home and watch that. And I think it's just I've just been so impressed with Michael during all this. It's just been great to just see him up close, kind of, no holds barred, and I just appreciate his honesty and seeing him, with kind of all the filters off has been really, really cool. And I agree with Rick. It's beyond compelling. It's just, it's just showing the human side of him. I mean, as great as he was, it's great, and how he's covering it and dealing with it and talking about it. I loved how he's talking about, I mean, he didn't sign up to be a role model, he was just signed up to compete and win. And I think that is a great message for these young players, is just sometimes that gets lost with all the hype and everything, that, we're still keeping score, and it is about winning.
To me, a couple things. Like, to me, everything was a cause. It was incredible to me the number of different causes he created to motivate himself. Like, I mean, like, first it was Drexler, then it was Marley, then it was, obviously Krause was always kind of in the edge. Barkley being the most valuable player. I mean, like, it was incredible to me that each and every day he found different ways to motivate himself, to kind of raise his bar a little bit. And, to me, that was, I wouldn't say unique. I mean, as coaches, we always try to find causes. But here's a player individually that found a way to kind of challenge himself that was, his own motivation, and that pushed him. Now, Rick, I got a question for you. Like, you've been in the league a long time. What do you think the people, like Jay Williams the other day said, well, the league's so much more athletic now. He wouldn't be able to dominate just athletically like he did back then, which I think is ridiculous, because he dominated athletically with his skill, with his competitive spirit, with his feel for the game. I mean, where are you on that?
He would have been as dominant or more dominant in today's game, as would Bird and Magic Johnson and, even Kareem. I mean, these guys, I think one thing, you look for when you analyze the history of any sport, Michael had that thing, that inner drive. He had to win. He knew he had the ability. He had come from a background where everything was earned. He was told he couldn't do things at a young age. He always took those challenges. But, you dream of having a player that, has to win. Now, I was lucky, when I came to Dallas. Both Jason Kidd and Nowitzki were both players that knew that they had to win. And then the question was, did we have enough talent around those guys? And then, were we going to ever be able to get on a run and get to the promised land? But when you have, a guy or two guys like that on your team, whether you're a college coach or an NBA coach, I mean, it is a magical situation that can never be duplicated. I mean, it is something else, because that player is finding things every day. And, the way that Michael, some of the practice footage where he's, getting on guys and his voice is louder than everybody else's. I mean, as a coach, this is the kind of stuff, you dream of. And so, we're all trying to create an environment where our best player can become that sort of guy. It seemed to come a little more naturally to Michael Jordan.
Phil, you had a guy, Adam Morrison. You said that you found you always had to find ways to keep him motivated and challenge him. Kind of explain it. I thought that was fascinating, what we're talking about today.
Yeah, look, Adam was. I mean, we discovered early that if we didn't keep score in a drill, and I mean, even a closeout, even the most mundane ones, if he didn't see the importance of it, some of his effort was sometimes not up to par. But we figured out early, if we kept score and everything and made everything a competition, then his effort was off the charts. And then also, as you and I were talking about, we also found that if we could create an edge with him, so my old assistant, Leon Rice, who's the head coach at Boise State now, would constantly be probably 50% factual and 50% not so factual as far as helping Adam gain edges. I mean, he'd say things like, hey, the opposing coach didn't vote for you all league last year, or boy, you should have seen the comments in the paper by the guy that's guarding you, or just things like that. And for whatever reason, he's so hyper competitive that he'd latch on to those things, and practices were great and effort in the games was great. So it was an interesting challenge, but like Rick was talking about, DeMontis Sabonis was like that also. I mean, just a ferocious warrior and competitor.
Tom, I'm sorry.
We had to kind of, not tamper that down, but we had to kind of feed that thing also with him. And not that you never had to create an edge, but his dad and his family just did such a great job with winning. Winning was the most important thing, and team was the most important thing. And just every time I step on the floor, you're going to get max effort and max intensity. And I think sometimes people in practice were a little bit taken aback by that, but it was sure awesome to have as a coach.
Tom, you always talk about player coach teams.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I think is best. And I think Rick said it, when you got somebody like that. And I mean, I think about it, and I've had some good players and I've had some good leaders, but Mateen Cleaves was my best leader, maybe not my most talented player, but he was my best leader. And leaders at an elite level, I think, have the ability to make other people around them better. You either do it by your voice, your play, whatever. When I came here, Magic Johnson I was a GA, and he was in his, I think, 4th or 5th year in the NBA. I'd already won a championship. We'd have pickup games at night. The Pistons would come, Trapuka and all those guys. We'd have 3,000-4,000 people at pickup games. I don't think Irvin ever lost. So I think he had some of those same qualities, never lost in cards, never lost in this and that. There's very few of those people that are that obsessed. And I learned through this thing. I mean, watching Michael in the camp all those years, he'd be the first one there, and I was challenging guys. I saw a little bit, but I didn't know him. I don't know him that well. But what I did see in this documentary was a guy that was so driven. I mean, he competing in golf, competing in cards, competing in this, and Rick probably knows more than we do. But I thought that part of it is why we won a championship. The greatest one I had was Cleaves. We won the championship. The greatest one here maybe ever was Magic Johnson. Maybe there's only been 2 championships. I mean, I'm not saying you don't need talent too, but you need one of those guys that's going to bring it every day, because a player-coach team is better than a coach-coach team, because as a coach, you don't get to be with them all the time in the locker rooms, on the airplanes, playing cards, whatever. And that's where you need that stud that just drags everybody with them.
Now, how about you have this hyper-competitive dude like Jordan or whomever, Rick, maybe it was Jason Kidd or Nowitzki, whomever. Phil, you've had guys like that, like you're talking about Morrison. And he's pushing and challenging his teammates. And yet you want him to be a good teammate. And yet they go back into the locker room, and you got to have someone who's coaching the locker room. How do you deal with – how have you guys dealt with guys that were so ultra-competitive but also could kind of – push the buttons of guys a little bit? I mean, especially like in the NBA, you get a guy that obviously Jordan talented, but he's also wearing on some dudes. How does that work, Rick?
Well, Kidd was probably the best example of that kind of guy. In our Dallas teams, but he had a real touch for it. You know, he was 37 years old when I got the job here, and he was still a great player. He was certainly getting toward the end of his career, but he had a great feel of, you know, how to push buttons. But it was subtle. It was more like he was a master at giving guys confidence. And I think that's, you know, one of the traits of a truly great player is that he has the ability to allow players that are playing with him to play beyond their means. Like I played 3 years with Larry Bird in Boston, and I was, you know, I was as marginal a role player as ever played in this league. But when Bird would throw you the ball and say, you know, shot, you know, go ahead, you got it. He would give you, you know, sort of an irrational confidence, and you would make the shot. And so, you know, it seems to me from watching this documentary that Jordan was an extreme case. You know, he was an extreme case. You know, and when you worked as hard as him, and this is just only an observation of this from afar. And I do know Michael. He and I were the same year in college, and over the years, you know, I run into him from time to time, and there's a relationship there because of the ACC. It's probably like the Big Ten and everything else. But from what I see from watching this thing, you know, Jordan was a guy that was the first in the gym, the last to leave. He was doing more work than anybody else. And so, you know, he had earned the right to be a guy that could, you know, get on his teammates where he thought it was the right thing, the right situation. And I think a lot of it was just creating that hyper competitive environment to constantly keep an edge.
Yeah, 84. That was at 84 when actually Indiana beat North Carolina, because I'm not sure we could have beaten North Carolina. And then we were fortunate enough to get Indiana the next night. And Kent Needland made that great defensive play, if I'm not mistaken, to help us get to that championship. Now, Tom, you got a hyper competitive dude, like who's in the league, Draymond Green. Like, where does he compare? And like, you watch him now in the league, and he's not afraid to push people's buttons. He's not afraid to kind of challenge guys. And he's not even the dude. He's one of the dudes. How was he to coach in college in that manner?
Well, there were some crazy timeouts now, I'll tell you. But you know what he was is winning was really all he cared about. I mean, he didn't play a lot his freshman year and started to play a little bit more his sophomore year, probably at his coming out party against Mark. I think he had 30-some up there. And that's when he really started shooting the ball better. But his competitiveness, and he was one of the guys that wasn't afraid to tell you, but he'd also be your buddy. That's what I liked about Michael last night. That's what I liked about my kid Cleves too, is you know, Michael's playing golf with his guys. He's going out to dinner. He's playing cards with his guys. And I think, like Rick said, when you're the hardest worker, you get respect, and it's by show. You know, I mean, you live, you walk walk the talk, or walk the walk even. And so you're really doing what you hope a coach wants you to do, but you're doing it on your own. I mean, that's the way Magic was. Draymond, you know, I say you got to either like the game, love the game, or live the game. And to be a pro, to me, unless you're extremely talented, you better be between loving and living it, at least if you're going to withstand it. Michael seemed to live the game, morning, noon, and night. Like Rick said, first guy there, last guy. I wouldn't say Draymond was like that. I think he liked and loved the game his first 2 years, and then started to love and live the game his last 2 years. But he would say what was on his mind, just like he does now. But I think there was a respect factor, and I think he respected me. I respected him. Gave him more slack than maybe somebody, but I think that's what all of us coaches do to a certain extent.
Who was your toughest guy? Was it Morrison?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't tough for me, just because I think he was really tough for the assistants, to be honest with you. He was like what Tom's saying. I mean, he respected me, and I knew what a competitor he was, and I had the assurance. I mean, I knew he was going to show up on game night. I mean, he responded, and I don't think people really give him enough credit. pro career and all aside, there was a lot of injuries, but that year in college, man, what him and JJ had going that year, and the places we were playing and the arenas we were and crowds we were dealing with, and he had multiple 30-point halves, multiple 40-point games, with everybody there to watch him and everybody there to shut him down. So there was a lot of pressure on him. So I had a tremendous amount of respect for how he just handled all that. But along the kind of the same lines, both coaches were talking about there. Nigel Williams-Goss is probably the best leader we've ever had up at our place, and it's no coincidence that was probably our best team that advanced the farthest. And he was a guy that was great, like Coach Carlisle said. He was unbelievable about throwing a pass and encouraging that guy to shoot. The next one's going in, and even sometimes we're us as coaches, we're caught up in everything. Maybe you don't always realize that a guy's struggling with his confidence a little bit because you're not seeing it, but maybe they're talking about it off the court. Nigel was great for building guys up and really helping with their confidence and instilling his confidence in them, which I think then carried over to their performance. So the great leaders like that have a real knack for it. And again, he was a guy that, if anything, worked harder than anybody we've had here. So kind of goes hand in hand.
Rick, international players, you've had a pretty good one. Now you've got another great one. Like, what is the difference? And Mark, you've had an incredible career with guys from overseas. Like, what is the difference in those guys? Like, whether it's Dirk or whether now it's Doncic or, the players that you've had that have transitioned to the NBA, how do they, just their interaction, how do they assimilate into the league, their maturity? How different is it dealing with those guys? Like Doncic, he would have been a freshman in college when you had him, basically. How is that transition, and how are they to coach?
Well, I've been very blessed. Early in my assistant coaching career with the Nets, we traded for Drazen Petrovic. So we had him for the better part of 2 years. In the second year, or I think in the third year, he was third team All-NBA, and then he had the tragic accident. Petrovic came over. If you watch films of Petrovic before he came to the NBA, he was emotional. He was animated. He was a wild man. But he came over to the NBA. He went to Portland first, and then he was very deferential. He never showed any of those kinds of emotions. Now, when he got traded to the Nets and became one of our best players, it changed a little bit. But he was a great player, and a couple of years later, I was in Portland as an assistant when Arvydas Sabonis came over. So, and this is kind of a side story, but during Sabonis's first year, I went over to his house the day that Domantas was born to congratulate him, and I ended up seeing a video of the birth. It was like unbelievable, along with drinking a lot of drinks and doing a lot of other stuff to celebrate. I guess kind of the Russian way. But Sabonis, I played against him when I was at Virginia. We played this game against it was the Soviet national team at the time. Sabonis was 18 years old. You guys probably remember they played Indiana. They played us. I mean, this was a team of men. And back in those days, like Sabonis had no injuries. He was a Larry Bird type player that was 7'4". I mean, he's unbelievable. So then, as the thing goes along here, I inherit an opportunity to be with Litsky, who's, like the greatest coach's dream that you could have. I mean, just wants to be coached, wants to be directed, best teammate of any, all-time great player. He's in the top 10 or 12 all time for sure. I don't think there's any question about that. But what I see is, as time's going along, is that, these guys are evolving, with social media and things like this. And, Doncic, is a different kind of personality coming from overseas. I mean, he is he's a guy that has a keen awareness of everything going on around him. And, at his career, in the second year of his career, you saw those media crowds and stuff like that. I mean, we're not seeing that kind of stuff, but we're seeing this guy get an amazing amount of constant attention. And he got it over in Europe as well. He has over 3 million Instagram followers. And so, he's dealing with some unusual pressures. He has the pressure to win because he's a winner and he's a guy that has to win, which is great. But with social media, he's also under I think, at times an unfair pressure to, create highlights, in real time and things like that. But the international players, are more and more Americanized. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, Mark's had a lot of them in his program. I think Izzo has probably had some in his. But that's what I see. And the world of basketball is becoming, pretty much a synonymous language.
Phil, you've had a ton of international guys. Why have you gone that direction? But more importantly, what is it like to coach those guys and fit into your culture?
We just stumbled into it. I mean, we were lucky enough to get Ronnie Turioff, way back in the day, and he had such a huge impact on our program and on our community, and and just on personally on all our families, and I think the success that Ronnie had just led to our place being attractive to other European players or overseas players, and then it just kind of has grown from there. I would just say, and I would still say this to this point, like when you get a kid from over there, like a Killian Tilly, they just haven't went through our whole system over here yet and there is absolutely unequivocally no sense of entitlement whatsoever. I mean, the guys that are flashing up on the screen right now, they're overjoyed when they get a pair of shoes, and they're just so willing to be coached and so ready to be coached and so eager to be coached and developed and to have everything. Strength and conditioning isn't a burden to them. They're excited to have somebody, helping them in that part of their life. Same with nutrition, even with school. They're great with school and excited for that opportunity. So it's just been an absolute joy for me to be involved with these guys and help them along their way. And all of them have just been so easy. I mean, I guess that's how I'd sum it up. Just really low maintenance and just end up being just legendary people in our program, but also just great friends. To Rick's point, I honestly, I don't think Arvydas has got nearly as much credit for just how great a player he was back in the day. I mean, it's a shame that that it took so long to get him over here. And from a guy that had that much success and then a son who was so good, I'm telling you what, he was the greatest, as good a dad as we've ever had here to deal with. He was just let us coach him, wanted us to coach him. And I don't want to bore people. We had one time like at a shoot around, I mean, this would never happen in this day and age, but Domus broke his finger and, catching a ball or something. So he calls his dad and we're thinking like, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to be out, and of course it was like against Western Appalachian State. And I was freaking out that we couldn't beat Western Appalachian State without Domus, or something. And it gets Arvydas on the phone, and Arvydas says, well, it's broken. Yeah. Well, did they say anything that could cause any more damage? And DeMontis is like, no. And he's like, well, tape it up. You need to play. That was the end of that. There's no load management.
Hey, all right. So Here's something I want you guys to talk amongst yourself on this because I think it's important. I'm going to tell you how I feel. The whole G League Academy, G League concept. All right, here's my take, and I'd be interested because Rick, I'm sure you have an opinion as an NBA guy, and I understand the NBA has an obligation to their owners, and the NBA obviously feels, or Adam Silver feels like, this is a good move for the league to make an investment in this G League Academy. Here's the problem I have. I got a couple of problems, and tell me I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm all for it. Look, college isn't for everyone. Not every single dude that walks through the door wants to go to college. I think if a kid does go to college, he's better off for it because you're taking away a little bit of his childhood in a lot of ways. Having said that, I understand it's not for everyone. Here's my concern. I'm not sure the NBA and college basketball, I'm not sure it's in the best interest of basketball if everyone doesn't get on the same page. I'm not sure it's the best interest of college basketball and basketball in general if we're really pushing and actually recruiting kids out of commitments to play in this G League Academy. I'm not sure it's in best interest of basketball when people from the G League Academy are allegedly telling potential guys they're trying to recruit, well, college basketball, they're not going to have a season next year. Or after they've decided to come back to college and say, you know what, it's just not for me, they're continuing to recruit those guys. Like to me, we've got to find some way to work together for the best interest of the game. Not for the best interest of the NBA, not for the best interest of college basketball, but I really feel that eventually the G League's starting to allegedly recruit underclassmen. The G League's eventually potentially thinking about going maybe to two rounds of a draft and having 60 guys in the league. And again, I don't know these for a fact. They're talking about having a dean of students. Look, there are prep schools, pop-up prep schools that have dean of academics. I understand that. But like, what's in the best interest of the young people? So, like, I don't get it totally. Look, if a kid wants to make money, I'm all for it. And I will give him a chance. We'll talk about that later. But where do you think the NBA is going with this, Rick? I mean, where would you like to see him go with it? Forget about take off your head coach of the Mavs hat. What's in the best interest of the game, big picture? Because you lived it, and obviously you.
Seth's gone. I guess he's turning it over to us. The thing that is amazing to me is that I think back on school, college. I went to high school. I went to a year of prep school because I was trying to get to Division I. I got one Division I offer at Maine. I go to Maine for 2 years. Decided I want to try to play big time somewhere. Virginia gives me a shot. The college experience is like the greatest experience of my life. I mean, my professional career has been awesome. But the experience you have in college is like, the experience you look forward to and remember. That's where you make your best friends and stuff like that. So, to see that the college experience is getting a bit marginalized like that is not great. Oh, hey there. Hey, here we go. But, I don't know that much about this whole thing, to be honest. I don't know all the parameters. From what I understand, there's going to be one team of all these better players. The model, I don't know that I really understand the entire model, and then, one night I'm watching HBO and that show, The Scheme, comes on, and you start watching that, and, you wonder how in the world could something like that ever happen. And so there's all this stuff that goes on relative to the college game, the bridge from the college game to the pro game. And I think, in a lot of ways, it's setting up to get rid of one and done at some point in a year, maybe 2 years. I keep hearing that that's a real possibility. But I think back to my years in college, there aren't many things I wouldn't give to have one more year of college. That's just how I see it.
Is Mark?
Well, I agree. I mean, I've been on the board a long time, and what I push for, especially to you, Rick, is, I got a good buddy in the NFL, of course, and the relationship with football, college, and pro seems so good, and ours has seemed disjointed, and I think some of it's our fault. You get presidents saying they're stealing our players. I mean, the objective is to get to what's going to make you money in life. I was just hoping they'd use us more as a feeder system, call it a farm league. I don't care what you call it, but also we've devalued education to the point where sooner or later, 99% of the kids that even get to the NBA don't survive in there very long. There's such a few that make it big or make it for a 10-year period. So I was always in favor of, if there's that much difference in the G League or the NBA and college, let's institute some rules that are in the pro ranks. Like, let's move our line back. Let's widen our lane. That's me. Some people disagree with that. I just think if we do everything we can do to help the player get ready, you're getting your education, even if you're there 1 year. I mean, it's better for you. You get your social education, and you're doing it, I think, without a lot of money, which anytime I talk to an NBA guy, a coach, a GM that talks to me about one of our players, I always say, well, I had no problem when he was here. And they said, yeah, but that was pre-money, not post-money. So we all agree that money changes us all to a certain extent. And I just worry about, I know Michael and Magic and LeBron, the guys that came out, and Kobe, they're going to make it. But I keep looking at how many kids aren't going to make it and get fooled by maybe agents, maybe runners, maybe parents. They're getting to be harder now. And it scares me for the kids. We're going to survive. We're going to make it. I mean, we're going to get players, and we're going to win, just like Mark's going to win and you're going to win. If you got a system, you're going to win. You just plug in guys. You might not win quite as high, but we're going to survive. It's the kids that I worry about don't survive.
Drew, what's your take?
I agree with both. I really agree. I feel really strongly with what Rick said. I just think everybody, it's all about, hurry up and get to where you're making money. And I think and that's fine if that's really, really, really what you want. And there needs to be a place, an avenue, a runway for guys who absolutely want no part of college, and that's fine. But I can just tell you, of all the guys that we've had, go pro and move on to play professionally, they all just yearn for, like Rick was saying, to get one more year back, to get back in the locker room, to get that kind of camaraderie. Just that, it's like a passage from young adulthood into becoming a real adult, into the real world, and it's a lot different. And I think they're really everybody that analyzes this and talks about it and wants to just kind of just kill the college system is totally missing the boat on that. And I think we have been great partners. The NBA is what every one of my players aspires to get to and play to. And so it's been great for us to keep pushing and prodding and try to develop our guys for that level. But we've been great for them. You know what? I mean, we find these guys, we evaluate them, we develop them physically, we develop mentally, socially, we help them out. We're there for them. Heck, we even call them when they're in the NBA to encourage them and keep them, going. And I think there's got to be some parameters or rules or something. I mean, if a kid, some of the things I'm hearing, where they're telling them there's not going to be a college season, where they're banging them on or having other NBA guys call and all this and that after these guys have signed and committed. I mean, I don't think that's a good optic for the NBA or for anybody, really. I think if we just get some parameters, they'll be fine. If those kids want to go there on January 1 or whatever the date is, and let them go. But I also think the one and done, getting rid of that, would probably help all this too.
The other thing that I think is going to be down the road is that this team, whatever they're calling it, like, I don't know, there are 10, 12 guys on it, whatever there is. Well, what about the 4 guys that don't play very much? They'll be making money. They may be making $300,000 or $400,000 or maybe $500,000. But then they're not playing much. Then are they going to look at it and say, well, gosh, I should have gone to college? And the system the last several years where, they've made it a little better where you, I think, have to declare a little bit earlier now. But so many of these guys, because of pressure from either agents and, like Iz says, family, and they're declaring for the draft and they just got no chance. And it would be good if there was some kind of a system where, they could still have a chance to go back to school. It just seems like that's a terrible waste.
I agree with you there, Rick. I think the hardest thing for these kids and their families and support systems, and like college isn't for everyone. I understand that. Your league, Rick, is an exclusive.
Oh, wow.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah,
Your league is an exclusive club. And it's hard to get to. And very few guys make it there. And the whole idea that everyone thinks it's a rite of passage now. Like, I'm a good player, I'll just get to the league. Well, you're not just going to get to the league. And only about, you think about 20 international players and then another 40 guys have an opportunity. And how long do those guys last? And then if a guy's special and different, and there's a very rare few guys like that, I worry that guys are going to get sold a bill of goods, and then they're going to be in a situation, they're going to play in this thing for a year, they're going to make their $225,000, which is about $150,000. They got to pay for their housing, they get a car, they got the people that are around them, and then where do they go back to? And that's where I think we've got to find a way, and I agree with you. I think that we've got to find a way to, I guess, if a kid goes and it just doesn't work, maybe have him come back. I don't know, but I don't like that there's no sense of what's in the best interest of long term. Because every high school kid thinks he's a pro. Every guy on your team, Tom, thinks he's a pro. Every guy on your team, Mark, thinks he's a pro. All right. And you know what? You guys have 2 of the best programs in the country, and very few guys make it. And Rick, the one thing I'd ask you is, like, I hear all these things when these kids are interviewed. They say, well, these guys are going to get me ready to play in the NBA. And, they're going I'm going to be working with NBA trainers. Like, the last time I checked, the Mark Fewes, the Tom Izzos, the John Calipari's, the Bill Selfs, and all those guys, like, is the game that stinking different that the things that Tom's players who have done very well in the league and Mark's players have done very well in the league and all these guys, it seems like those guys are pretty well coached, understand how to play hard, understand accountability, responsibility. Am I way off that they're selling something that really isn't real? I mean, again, that's a question, not a statement.
Look, there's great coaching in college. I mean, so the programs you just mentioned are a few of the many, many, many. And I mean, just for me, as I take a step back and look at the college game and then look at the NBA game, the one thing that's interesting to me is that it doesn't appear that the college game has been hit by the analytics bug the way that the NBA game has. The coaches, still in large part keep their systems intact. I don't see a lot of. I see some. You see some stuff where there's some small college teams that are bombing a ton of threes and stuff like that. But a lot of the mainstay programs are staying true to their tradition of how they play. Look, I go back to the value of the college experience. I mean, being able to play for a guy like Iz or Mark or Bill Self or Krzyzewski or one of those guys. Just the mentoring that you get, the experience you get, of having to perform, on the court, but also in the classroom. It develops you like nothing else. Look, I'm I'm an NBA guy. I'm in my 35th year of this. I couldn't be more blessed. And I think we're doing what the NBA is doing. They're doing for the right business reasons, and they're also doing it to supply an option for kids that just aren't that interested in college that may be good enough. But really, the only difference I would see is that this feeder team is going to be playing more, 5-out basketball, the threes and the rim attacks and stuff like this. And you go to college, you're gonna be playing in more of a quote unquote college system, which is great. I think that's a great basis to build your career on if you aspire to be an NBA player, which, as you guys say, all these guys do. But I think that's a great place to start.
Oh, I like to thank you guys. I mean, again, we're just trying to find ways to create a conversation about the game and try to bring an NBA vision, a little bit what's going on in college basketball. And, let's face it, these charted waters for all of us. There's no blueprint, there's no plan for what we're all dealing with individually, collectively, with our teams, with the people that we're caring about. And, the whole idea is just to create a conversation and have a little bit of normalcy. And like Rick, you earlier, where you're doing these Zoom calls with coaches to try to to try to kind of get lost in a little bit of what we love and not have to deal with the day-to-day messaging that we're hearing on TV or reading or everything else, which is, obviously it's exhausting. So I really appreciate you guys doing this. Stay safe. And hopefully eventually we'll all get back to a normal life. But again, I say this at the end of every time we do this: the doctors, the hospital workers, the nurses, the people that move our food chain, the people that are teaching our kids in schools, the youth basketball coaches, and people in grassroots basketball that are really, I've done so many good things that can't do anything to have an impact on young people in this time of their lives. I just think we need to be all thankful for so many that are giving up so much of the news for others in these times. And but hopefully eventually we can all get back to some normal. So guys, be safe. And I really do appreciate you spending some time and your insight. And by the way, your view is absolutely freaking ridiculous.
Where is that?
Be safe, guys.
The kids running around
Rick,
playing tag in the
not so
background.
Mine's not so great. Hey, shout out to Albert Hall, HallPass Media, HallPass Network. Thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah.
Really enjoyable. Wish you guys the best.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Rick, good to see you. Mark.
Yep. Likewise.
Take care, man.
Be well.